we're going to constraints on government spending. Government spends, yes, but government might need to stop spending or cut its spending. If government has to do this, government does this most of the time because if government do not, they're going to spend a lot and go into debt. And because for every spending of government, it comes through its budget. That is the point there. So government would not want to spend more than its budget, because if government spends more than its budget, then the government is going to deficit. And going to deficit means you need to start borrowing money, maybe from IMF. But government doesn't want to do that. So for government not to avoid that, government will stop spending or cut its spending. That is what constraints on government spending is. Do you understand what constraint is here now?
Yes.
So as soon as government stops spending or cut its spending, it affects businesses. So how does it affect businesses? That's where we're going. The first one, government will cut spending by reducing the amount spent on public sector. As this may mean that workers are laid off. This means those workers won't be able to have income which they can spend. So if government wants to stop, because most of the countries, the largest proportion of the largest working population is through the public sector. So if government is cutting its spending on the public sector, government might do this by laying off workers. So laying off government workers means those government workers that are laid off will not have income to spend. So because they don't have income to spend, then businesses will not be able to sell as they used to sell. So the revenue for businesses would fall. That's one of the consequences of constraints in government spending. I think the point is clear.
Yes.
The second one, the private sectors. Most of the time, the private sectors, they rely on government parastatals for contracts. Some private sectors, from individuals, they get contracts from governments. You know, when we're talking about privatization, okay, sometimes government would let out or give out contracts to private individuals. What normally government would do, they allow the private sector to take over, to do it. So now that government is cutting spending, government might stop giving contracts out to private sector businesses. So as a result of that, the private sector businesses will not be able to make revenue as they used to make. That's another consequence. Do you understand? So those contracts that government gives out to the private sector, government will stop giving it out. Government will start doing it itself. That's another consequence. I think it's clear. So if government stop giving contracts out, it means those who rely on the private sector or that relies on government for contracts will not be able to get it. Their revenue would fall, and they might also lay off workers or reduce their investments. The third one, cuts in pensions and other social benefits will reduce spending. So there's social benefit, which means maybe unemployment benefits or low income benefits or pensions. All these things are government spending. So if government wants to cut spending, government might reduce pensions, might cut unemployment benefits. So if government cuts all these social benefits, it means those who benefit from this government spending would not be able to have income. Their purchasing power would fall. And if their purchasing power falls, they won't be able to spend. As a result of that, businesses will not be able to make revenue. Revenue from businesses will drop. Is it clear? So that's our constraint on government spending. So how can government affect business activity? So here I go. How can government affect business activity? One, government can change laws. There are regulations, there are legislation. If government wants to encourage industries or firms or investors, they might deregulate, soften the laws in the country. Soften the law means law becomes favorable for investors. As a result of that, more investment into the economy or to the country. So government laws are affecting positively the economy. On the other hand, if government increases its laws, it might become a sort of restriction for businesses. As a result of that, they might not be able to invest. Because you have to comply with laws. Complying with laws might increase your cost of production. Do you understand the first point? The second one, influence the interest rate and exchange rate. Interest rate is the price of borrowing and the benefit of saving. So if government wants to encourage borrowing, government might reduce the interest rate. If government reduces interest rate, it allows businesses that needs to borrow or that needs to invest in capital goods through borrowing to be able to borrow from the banks. Because the interest rate has fallen. And as soon as the interest rate falls, it allows more borrowing. So businesses that need to borrow for investment will be able to borrow more. Then they will be able to expand their business, they will be able to employ more workers. And their output will also increase. Do you understand the point here? Government influences interest rates by lowering the interest rate. This encourages a lot of people to borrow, even individuals to be able to borrow. And if individuals are able to borrow more, they'll be able to spend more. Businesses will be able to make more. Do you get it? And for exchange rate, which is the price of a country's currency in relation to other countries' currencies, here, if government reduces the exchange rate, it allows businesses in the country that does exportation, businesses in the country that do exportation, to be internationally competitive. Their output will increase. Foreign customers will want to buy more from them. Do we understand? Yes. And on the other hand, if the government thinks about businesses that rely mostly on importation, maybe importation of raw materials, government might increase its exchange rate, which makes importation to become cheaper. When the exchange rate increases, when the exchange rate increases, importation becomes cheaper. So businesses in the country that rely on importation of raw materials, they will have it as a reduced cost. So their cost of production will reduce. Is it clear? Yes. The last one, change levels of government expenditures or taxation. Changes in levels of government expenditures or taxation. If government wants to encourage production of goods and services, government will subsidize for firms. Subsidizing for firms means the cost of production for firms will reduce. As a result of that, they'll be able to produce more. Do you understand? On the other hand, if government wants to maybe increase its revenue, government might increase taxation. If government increases taxation, profits made by firms would reduce because government will be making more revenue on taxes. Yes,
everybody stop the government from making high taxes.
No, nobody could stop because the government of a country rules through constitution.
But if you pay like very high tax.
Now, if government is doing that, there will always be a reason for government decision. So it's a policy. So if government thinks, if government of a country thinks it is important to increase tax, government will use fiscal policy. If government thinks there's a time to reduce tax or to spend more to the society or to the country, government will use fiscal policy of subsidy. So whatever government does, government is doing it based on the situation of the economy. So government will not want, because government wants to render services to the public. Government wants to make sure the society becomes a better place. So government will not do things that will become a detriment or that will be harmful to the populace. Is it clear? Yes. So whatever government decision is for the good of the society. Is it clear? Yes. So that's about constraints on public spending.